Welcome into another edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt and producer Kevin later on in the show to go over the Bills' 25-20 loss to Jacksonville, as well as New York Giants game. More importantly, the Giants game coming up on full, Brian Daboll's return, as we've mentioned here in the pregame show. So we got a lot to talk about, both going forward, what's next for the team, as well as what we just saw and what we think that'll mean going forward. As always, this show is brought to you by Sons of Erie, www.sonsoferie.com. Go on there and check out all of their artwork. See a great picture of Jim Kelly and Josh Allen rendition behind me. That has been given to Jim Kelly. So it's been a really cool thing to see. Mike, first and foremost, let's see how you're doing today.
I'm doing okay besides this miserable weather in Western New York right now. It finally feels like the bad part of fall, but other than that, I'm doing okay. I know the loss was disappointing this weekend, but there's a stretch of games coming up ahead that are favorable to the Bills. Hockey season's almost here, so I'm in a good mood. I'm ready to talk some Bills football.
You got it. And there's, we'll start with we'll kind of start with the recap of the game first, and then we'll get into Giants talk here in a little bit. We won't belabor the point here. We're already beyond 48 hours, kind of postpartum here of the game. 25-20, the Bills looked sleepy for much of the game. The fourth quarter looked a little bit better. The second half in general was a little bit better. The first really quarter and a half were sluggish. The defense was in the game. Then they wore down and the offense kind of got started and the defense was out of it. So they never were in sync. It was one of those games to where the two units were not in sync at any stage of the game. When the offense was rolling, they didn't get any defensive support, and vice versa. The defense was rolling. The offense could not keep them on the field, keep them off the field. And whereas they were converting some timely third down conversions over the Bills' defensive backs. Mike, kind of what did you take away from that defensive performance by the Bills? Obviously, the Bills have lost Daquan Jones for foreseeable future, if not into January, and Matt Milano foreseeable future, if not into January. We don't know if either of them will come back right now, but we'll bring you notes and nuggets as we hear more on that. We'll maybe bring on Kyle Trimble into the show next week. That's kind of what I have jotted down to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about this, Mike. But what is your takeaway from this defensive scrappy performance? One, we had Dorian Williams in the game. You had Kyer Elam. You had Ingram go in for Elam late in the game. You had Dodson replacing Williams at times, or McDermott trying to mix it up. And then you had A.J. Epinesa really come through as not only a defensive end starter, but really a defensive end one by all of his metrics.
Yeah, so let's first, I'm going to talk about what happened on Sunday. I want to address the injuries and how the Bills defense will be moving forward later in the show, because I definitely have some strong opinions. I think I differ from a lot of the fan base on my feelings about the Bills defense in the upcoming weeks and the rest of the year. But as far as Sunday's performance, what you saw is the result of just dealing with a ton of injuries in a exhausted team. They entered the game without Greg Rousseau, Christian Benford, Shaq Lawson. Poona Ford was inactive. And then you right away have injuries to Daquan Jones, Matt Milano. You had Von Miller on a snap count. It was a defense that was put in a very difficult position. And the Bills offense didn't make their job any easier by struggling to sustain drives in the first half, essentially keeping the defense on the field much longer than what they really needed to be in order to try to get their energy and keep their energy level at a high level. So my initial thoughts, it was a struggle. They scrapped it out. The fact that they held Jacksonville to 25 points was actually kind of impressive, considering the fact that the Jags were moving the ball all over them for most of the game. The defensive line, when you don't have Daquan Jones, that's going to make a difference, especially when Poona Ford would be one of the guys that you'd expect to step up, is inactive. When you had A.J. Epinesa playing tremendous football, those two sacks, getting past deflections, he's showing he's a starting defensive end in this league. And I think next year he's going to get paid pretty well, probably not by the Bills, but by someone. And then on the other side, Leonard Floyd is still playing good football. Bernard is still playing solid, but not having Milano, that hurts the entire middle of the field. And having a Dorian Williams, who actually played okay at times, being forced into action, that's a tough thing for this defense. And on the back end, it's just clear Kyer Elam just does not have it at this point in time. I don't want to give up on him forever, but at this point, he can't see the field. He is a liability out there. I know he's been working hard. He's trying to get himself in the right position. I give him, I credit him for all the work he's putting in. But Calvin Ridley had really struggled the last 3 weeks, and he looked like an all-pro going up against Kaiir Elam. And you even saw how it really impacted even the coaching staff and the play calls on defense late in the game, where on the 3rd and longs, the Bills felt like they had to blitz. They didn't trust Kaiir Elam would be able to hold up without any pressure. And even with those blitzes, Trevor Lawrence was able to get good enough protection, get the ball out on time, and 90% of the time, Ridley was wide open. So it was a tough defensive performance. They battled. They ultimately held Jacksonville down enough to where the offense should have found a way to win the game. But I don't think what we saw Sunday will be symbolic of what we see going forward from this unit.
Yeah, I think that the Bills, to your point, Mike, are a little bit better off at the corner position than many think that they are. Like, McDermott's going to always churn out these corners. I think missing Benford was bigger than we thought last week, especially. And then the ability to have Dane Jackson, the guy, I criticize, but by all accounts and metrics, he does get the job done. Doesn't usually pass my eye test, but once again, my eye test is not better than numbers at times. So just like I like to say in general. So he does he is a competent corner. He does have some good metrics. He's very athletically kind of average or below average. But he seems to know the defense, be in the right place, and do what he needs to do. And the Bills brought in Josh Norman as well. Interesting move. I believe that's a player coach move to the practice squad. No one knows this defense under McDermott better than him. He's played many years in it, made a living in it. Don't think you'll see him on the field. I really don't. There'd have to be an emergency situation where he'd be able to go in there and do it. But I think it'll only help players like Benford and players like Kaiir Elam and Ingram and others who are in this system and may play before him. So we'll see if he's a player coach, if he's half and half, or if he's here to play. We'll have to kind of see what that looks like. But I look at it no different than like a Davis Webb on the practice squad. When you have a Davis Webb there really just in the rooms and teaching what he sees, and just a high level coach at this stage of his career. And there's no better way to do it than pay him that kind of salary on a practice squad number. It works out for the Bills too, Mike. So I have no ultimate issues there. And by all accounts, I think that the Bills could be aggressive in 3 weeks from today when we have a trade deadline coming. You've seen some more aggressive moves here already in the NFL. This isn't the years of the past where maybe only one player gets traded. You kind of see these bigger moves happen. You have the Vikings, you have the Broncos, you have other teams that are willing to fire sale and help out. We're going to save some of that talk for later on as things become a little bit more clear. But it is something to keep your eye on at some of these positional rooms here. So basically 3 weeks from today, maybe we'll have something additional to talk about there on that front. But as you look at the current roster as it's constructed, they are carried as far as the defensive line takes them. AJ Epinesa has been a beast. He has been much overlooked last year, and we talked about his numbers being really good, being really like starter level numbers. And then you look at this year where he's only compounding the fact that he has been a fantastic football player, and one where you look at him on the sideline with the oxygen mask and you're like, when is he getting back in the game? Because he's that important to this game to have on the field. So, and then the emergence of Kingsley Jonathan, a guy that snuck on the roster. I had him in my roster projections. He keeps playing well, 5 pressures, one of the highest rated players out of the game for the Bills. That defensive line rotation is still sick, even though Daquan Jones was playing at an elite level. He was unblockable. He was winning in double teams. His pass rush win rate was through the roof. He's one of the best. He was on his way to all pro through 4.5 weeks. He was seriously one of the best defensive tackles in the game, playing better than your favorite defensive tackle for the most part. So that is a huge loss, but Poona Ford steps in. Could we have an addition there? I don't know. They still have 4 defensive tackles and 5 defensive ends. I don't know that you see anything on the D-line right now happen. But, Mike, there is a lot to like about the Bills' defensive front. However, the elephant in the room, the loss of another All-Pro in Matt Milano, that's a topic I want to ask you about. Are you more worried? I mean, I think we're all through. Like, you can lose a game. Like, hopefully it doesn't hurt the Bills too much. But are you able to overcome the loss of Matt Milano and what he's able to do now when you have, yes, we want to see Dorian Williams. but you're going from Matt Milano to Dorian Williams. You're not going from a lesser player to Dorian Williams.
Yeah, so Matt Milano is obviously the biggest loss of the three major losses the Bills have suffered on defense the last 2 weeks. And the main reason being they don't have an in-house replacement that you can depend on. So I'll answer the Matt Milano part in a second, but I want to go through this entire defense, if you don't mind me, quickly. So I still think this is a top 10 defense. And people are going to say I'm crazy for saying what I'm saying right now. They're going to regress. They're not going to be an elite top 3 unit like we have seen the last 2 years. But I've seen a lot of people saying the Bills cannot sustain a loss to Matt Milano, Daquan Jones, Trey White, and that this team is they have no Super Bowl aspirations. I cannot disagree anymore with that statement. And to me, I think that is an instant overreaction hot take that is a consequence of the social media hot take radio era where we just say stupid stuff constantly. The reason why I believe that, first of all, the Bills entered this year with 5 former All-Pros on this defense. They just lost 2 of them in Trey White and Matt Milano. They still have 3 remaining on this team, 2 of them being your safeties, and then Von Miller. When you have an elite defense that is consistently great on a year-to-year basis, anytime you have an injury, it's going to feel like a major injury. Yes, not all injuries are created equal, but if you go through the Bills' starting 11 on defense, there's only 1 or 2 players on this entire defense that you wouldn't consider above average starters at their position. If it's Taron Johnson, one of the best nickel corners, if it's Micah Hyde, former All-Pro safety, Jordan Poyer, former All-Pro safety, Trey White, former All-Pro corner, if it's Christian Benford, it's still a quality corner. If you go through the defensive ends, you're talking about high-quality guys. The defensive tackles, high-quality guys. There's only maybe 3 guys on the entire defense. If they went down, you would be like, well, not the biggest loss in the world. But it's not just who goes down, but who replaces them. So you look at this defensive line. Daquan Jones goes down. That sucks. He had one of the highest double team rates and one of the highest win rates in the league. So he's been dominant, like you said, on his way to an all-pro season if he would have stayed healthy. But this is why you signed Poona Ford. I'm not saying that Poona Ford is going to replace the production of Daquan Jones, but this is a guy that started 63 of his previous 65 games with the Seahawks the last 4 years. He's a guy that graded out prior to last season in the 70s and low 80s on Pro Football Focus. He's a guy that was considered an above-average D tackle. You still have Jordan Phillips. You still have Ed Oliver, Tim Settle. Ed Oliver is playing at a Pro Bowl pace right now. He already has 4 sacks, which is second in his career, with 12 games left in the regular season. You look at the defensive ends. You have 4 starting defensive ends on this team right now. Leonard Floyd already has 5.5 sacks. He's on pace for a career high in sacks. You have A.J. Epineza with 3 sacks, an interception returned for a touchdown. He's on pace for a career year. You have Greg Rousseau, who would have been double-digit sack guy last year, who's off to a tremendous start this season. He's day-to-day. He'll be back sooner than later. Von Miller's coming back from injury. He's going to be good. This pass rush, and hear this out, Kevin. This is a crazy number. The Bills already have 21 sacks through 5 games. They are on pace for 70 sacks this season. 70. 50 is a crazy number. 50 is a great number. They are on pace for 70 sacks. And granted, they're probably not going to get to that number, but they're going to get a lot of sacks. This pass rush is elite. And when you have an elite pass rush, you can get by with having a lesser secondary or lesser linebackers. But this is the part why I still think they're going to be good. The secondary still is quality. Trey White is good. He's a great player, but Trey White was not Pro Bowl Trey White anymore. He was very good Trey White, but not Pro Bowl Trey White. Dane Jackson has started 20-plus games with the Bills over the past 2 years. Christian Benford has shown that he is a good player. Everybody freaking out about last week realized Christian Benford wasn't on the field. Greg Rousseau wasn't on the field. They were missing a lot more than just Milano and Daquan Jones. Communication is key in the secondary with Poyer and Hyde. If you have a secondary of Poyer, Hyde, Benford, Jackson, and Taron Johnson, you're still going to be solid back there. You're still going to be solid. So what it all comes down to is linebacker play. What are you going to get out of Dorian Williams or Terrell Dodson, whoever fills in for Milano? It's going to be a noticeable drop. But is that the type of drop that gets you from being the third-ranked DVOA defense to being a bottom 10 unit? No, they are not dropping from number 3 in the league to the bottom 10. This is, I think, worst case, they're in the 10 to 15 range defensively throughout the rest of the year, with the roster being the way it is right now at this point. And this is also why they drafted Dorian Williams. We were talking all offseason about how athletic he is. He is an athletic freak. He was 88th percentile on RAS, similar to Terrell Bernard. He runs a 4.49. He has the speed and athleticism to keep up. Now what he needs to do is get coached up and comfortable. And if you're going to be dealing with injuries as a premier football team, it is way better to be dealing with these issues week 5, week 6 than week 15, 16. This gives the Bills ample time to see what they have in these guys and try to address the problem and come up with solutions. The next 3 weeks, the Bills play the Giants, they play the Patriots, and they play Tampa Bay. The Giants are the 32nd ranked offense in the league. The Patriots are the 28th ranked offense in the league, coming off a shutout against the Saints. And the Bucs are led by Baker Mayfield in the definition of mediocre. To basically finish up, you never hear anybody right now saying that the Miami Dolphins are not a Super Bowl contender. Everyone you talk to will tell you that the Miami Dolphins are a Super Bowl contender. Well, you know what? Their defense is quite a bit worse than the Bills. So if you think Miami is a Super Bowl contender and the Bills aren't, you're saying that you think that a Tua-led offense is a world ahead of the Bills offense. I don't agree with that. Kansas City last year won the Super Bowl with the 17th ranked DVOA defense. They had 6 rookies playing on that team at times during that season. If we're going to say that Kansas City can win with an average defense, if we're going to say that Miami can win with a below average defense, how the hell can the Bills not win? They have 3 months to figure it out. And I just have 2 things I want to pull up quick. This is the Super Bowl odds right now from after Sunday. Before the game, the Bills were plus 700. Now they range from plus 800 to plus 950. They're still the 4th best odds according to Vegas. This is also a DVOA projection of the AFC East after Sunday's results. They still give the Bills a 90.5% chance of making the playoffs with a 55% chance of winning the division and still a 21% chance of getting the top seed in the AFC. These injuries matter, but they do not have as big of an impact as what fans are going to be making them. Because in the reality, Kevin, you're big on WAR. You know WAR number, wins above replacement in baseball. If you have a wins above replacement around 10, that's a great number. But ultimately, it means you're making 1 extra win per 16 games you play. In football, the average defensive player doesn't even have a WAR of 0.5. You add up the WARs of these 3 players combined, you're talking about maybe a win to 2 wins over the course of the season. So if you thought the Bills were going to win 13 games, maybe they win 11. If you thought they were going to win 11, maybe 10 or 9. They're going to be okay.
Well, you started going single digits there, so you're starting to lose me a little bit.
I mean, I don't know what the exact WAR numbers were, but the point being, the secondary is going to be okay as long as they don't sustain another injury and then have to have Kyer Elam play a bunch. And the defensive line is playing at a level that us in Buffalo haven't seen in over a decade. So the big question is there someone that can just play adequately at outside linebacker? And we'll see. I think even if outside linebacker is a struggle, this is why you have one of the best defensive masterminds in the NFL as your head coach, because he can scheme around certain things and they will make adjustments to find a way to get through. And I'm even saying worst case scenario, say the Bills defense does fall to 20th in the league, which I think is way further than what it will drop overall. You still have Josh Allen as your quarterback. I don't think fans of the Patriots, fans of the Chiefs, fans of the Colts or the Broncos in the last decade when they had Peyton Manning, when fans of people that have Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, I don't think they're looking at it as, damn, we had a few defensive injuries. Now we can't win a Super Bowl. They're looking at it as like, okay, offense, carry the load now. Get it done. The Bills are averaging 31.8 points a game. I'm not going to freak out about a couple players getting hurt, regardless of how good they are, because I'm not trying to downplay their significance. Those are all studs. But the Bills still have a lot of studs on this unit.
Well, there we go. We got a 12-minute rant by Mike Blunt. Live on air, everybody. 12 minutes we got there. I was timing his soliloquy about his opinions. So, I think for me, the war discussion on what was actually lost on Sunday is what needs to be discussed, because, over a 17-week season, there is only in the sport of football, there's only a minimal war reduction. One of the biggest positions we all know is quarterback. That's what would really hamper in big numbers, like big number war replacement. But even an offensive line in general, who might play good football, a war on that offensive line might only be a game above replacement for the entire 5 players playing good, 1.5 maybe. So using these 3 players who probably are as good as it can be without being a quarterback, and maybe Diggs, you would probably keep. These would not be the 3 players you would select. Therefore, I do see maybe a game. But the problem is, Mike, I think that game already happened. It was the Jacksonville game. That game, I think, goes differently with their starters playing. I think you've already lost the war of that game. Josh Allen said it himself. The wind was sucked out of him, and the air was strange feeling of watching, some of their all-pro players just in the same play leave the game. After a very ticky-tack hands to the face penalty while Ed Oliver was being held. That actually was the 5 points the Bills lost by. So the war there, it was one of those other games with the Jets where you had to have a culmination of things. In this case, the Bills missing their quality defenders, them losing 40-20 in time of possession, an illegal hands to the face causing a 5-point penalty. Those are the situations to where that you need to beat a team like the Bills, and I just do not see those coming very often. You may already have the 1 or 2 times that will happen this year, one being in London on a team with extreme data of staying there with extra time to rest. And Travis Etienne, a guy I really liked, I really wanted the Bills to draft, said it best, that it was an absolute advantage to be able to do so. It wasn't the factor when the Bills left, because the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have been going there for many, many, many years, as said by Justin on our show last week, they do the same schedule, guys, the same schedule against the Atlanta Falcons the week prior. You even have Tennessee Titans, after watching what the Bills did, the same schedule again going out there as well. The Ravens have flipped it up to try to go a little bit earlier. But the fact was, you had a team that does what they're supposed to do and leaving on a Thursday night, early Friday, getting in, and a team that was there for extra time, almost like an extra bye week, essentially, of not having to travel and essentially getting a home game. And Travis Etienne said his body was fully rested. It felt good. Those are all the things that you cannot say as you watch them roll out a fake turf underneath a beautiful grass in Tottenham Stadium. That was one thing that you saw some players and some players' wives come out and say they were not expecting that to happen. But really appreciate you, Morning Mayan, for the super chat there for Mike's 12-minute rant. Run that back, anybody. That rant was brought to you by Sons of Erie, www.sonsoferie.com. Get out there and check what Mike just had to say for a 12-minute period, hopefully making you feel better too. So we really hope what he was able to say brings this into light a little bit more. And same for us. The film wasn't all bad. There were some good things on film. Ed Oliver's a game wrecker, and he's back, and he's going to maybe get some of his running mates back this week with Greg Rousseau. You have how well AJ Epinesa has played. I mean, Terrell Bernard's now a pivotal part of this defense. And Christian Benford couldn't come back at a simpler and better time than he can right now. So the penalties were rough too. That's never an excuse for this game, but they were untimely, and it was a flag show for both sides. It was not a good football game to watch. I thought the Bills did a great job making Trevor Lawrence hold on to the ball. For the amount of time that they had, I don't think that he particularly is somebody that would scare me deep into the playoffs in Buffalo late in the year. It wasn't one of those kind of things where I don't think they did too much. If the Bills had 40 minutes time of possession, Mike, what do they do with that? They score 40. So I don't think that there's a situation to where if that's how you're going to handle your 38 minutes and 12 seconds against the Buffalo Bills, I'm not too worried about anything else. They needed to score more points than that against a backup, really 2s and 3s of the Buffalo Bills for the most part. You had their starting safety core. You had Taron Johnson out of the game. You had a situation, Mike, with Kingsley Jonathan, who was banged up throughout the day. Kendall Vickers playing defensive end for as good as these just defensive line as we just have gone over this whole show. Kendall Vickers playing defensive end. And then if Ed Oliver wasn't on the field, you're looking at Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle. You're looking at complete backups for a lot. And then you had a rotation at one of the linebacker spots. You had doing something at the other cornerback spot. And you had Dane Jackson, who's already a fill-in. He was not the starter to start the year, no matter what you think of Dane Jackson. Some like him, some don't. I don't. But I see why he's valuable. He's not a starter. He was not a starter to start the season. He lost his job to Christian Benford, period. He's only in the game for Trey White. So you have backups across the field, except at the safety position. And you had 2s and 3s in there for a majority of the day. I thought they did pretty good, though a little bit inflated because they just weren't getting off the field on third down. Allowing 10 conversions is too many. I don't just point to the offense. Your defense needs to get off the field occasionally to give the ball to the Bills for more repetition to increase when that onslaught of Bills offense in the fourth quarter came. They needed to get off the field in timely spots. They weren't able to.
I have a hot take for you. I have a hot take for you. And maybe this isn't even a hot take. If Greg Rousseau and Christian Benford play that game, the Bills hold that Jags team to like 13, 14 points. I think.
Well, I got 5 off penalty, so I agree. Yeah.
Because my belief is single-handedly 2 things cost the Bills defensively in that game. One, they just couldn't get anything out of Kaiir Elam. He was burnt the entire day. He was a liability. He was getting picked on in every big situation, and that was a large reason why the Bills couldn't get off the field. Number 2, you mentioned it. The defensive line was forced to play backups almost the entire late portion of the game because A.J. Epineza was completely exhausted. Von Miller was on the snap.
Was also not a starter, by the way.
Yeah, so you have Kendall Vickers and Kingsley Jonathan being forced to take critical snaps in late moments. And even with Elam, it got so bad they're putting in Jamarcus Ingram, a former UDFA out of UB, part of an awful UB secondary his senior year, somehow now being an NFL player. I'll tell you what, I remember talking to certain coaches at UB that never thought he would be an NFL player, but credit to him to getting to this point. But if they would have had a Greg Rousseau and a Christian Benford, I think that would have been enough of a difference to really drastically alter the outcome, because I don't think Benford would have been toast against Ridley the entire game. Yeah, they would have converted a few times. I don't think it would have been the entire game. And I think Rousseau being in the game would have helped in a little bit with the run defense, and it also would have helped a little bit with the pressure. I feel like the Bills got to the point where they thought they had to blitz on some important situations just to try to alter and get in Lawrence's head. And credit to Lawrence, he stepped up big. But the important thing to take away from Sunday is that wasn't a true representation of the Buffalo Bills defense. And that is not what we will be seeing in the weeks to come. It's one thing to lose 1 or 2 players in the game. That's bad enough. But when you go into that game already minus 3 players that have gotten a decent amount of playing time for you, you're really down 5 players in that situation. And that put the defense in just a horrendous situation. And the offense needed to do a better job of helping them out and sustaining drives. And that wasn't something that happened until late in the game when they were in pass-only mode at that point.
And shout out to the Bills pass blocking, still keeping Josh Allen's clean tooling. Speaking of, you mentioned the Bills sack totals to begin with. They've only allowed 2 sacks over the last 3 weeks. So at some point, that is effective football. You're not going to see too many 20-point performances like you saw with 18 minutes. I mean, that's hard to get anything going with 18 minutes. Like, the defense did need to get the Bills the ball a little bit more. They did play well. They did do what they wanted to do in stretches, especially in the red zone. I think that they needed to continue to get the ball back to the Bills. Carl says, flip that, though. The offense needed to get first down once in a while to give the defense some rest. Punting 6 times killed our exhausted defense. Yeah, I mean, you can look at it like that for sure, too. I'm definitely somebody that subscribes to the fact of a defensive coach with a defensive team in terms of how he's coaching. I would love to give the ball back to Josh Allen. And I subscribe to not necessarily blaming probably the reason the Bills are, to Mike showed the statistics earlier and the odds of the reason why those odds and the DVOAs and a lot of the offensive stuff are still in the favor because of Josh Allen. So I do think that he was sluggish. He was making the throws though. His numbers were elite. There was a lot of things coming out, including, all of his EPA, his points that he effectively created by his play, which is a yardage thing. How well is he moving the ball? Air yards, there's a couple of factors in there. How, a 3rd and 5 run where you get 6 yards is a way better play than 6 yards on a 3rd and 10. Simplistic stuff like that, where his numbers were still really good. And he had a couple of untimely drops, a couple of untimely penalties. I just needed to get the ball back into his hands in those situations. Yes, he could have moved the ball, but realistically, the way he played with the way the game flow went, the way it was going, I needed more stops from the defense in this specific. You can't allow 10 conversions. That's just never going to work out well for you, except if you think you're going to get in a huge battle. They were unable to get him off the field. But Mike, we have a Giants game coming up, and we could kind of break down the nuances of these. The air yards where Josh Allen were number 1 in the league. Like, there's so many good stats. This wasn't the Jets game where Josh Allen was completely poor. This was a game where he's only furthering his status. I would have liked to see a little bit better first half, but I'm not going to harp too harshly on that in that performance. So before we get into the New York Giants, we're going to bring up producer Kevin here on the show here in a moment. It is our old producer, AJ Sobolski's birthday, so shout out to him, even though I don't get shout outs on his show. Anyways, I'm going to give him a shout out for his birthday. And I told him he could pick a quick segment that he wanted us to talk about, so Mike and I will talk for a brief time. He wanted us to rank the Bills running back. So we're going to do that real quickly, and then we're going to get into the Giants game and bring up producer Kevin here as well. But first, we're going to have a quick break to hear what a little bit from Greg and Aaron.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
There we have it. So what I promised AJ, we're going to rank some running backs, Mike. We're going to bring up producer Kevin to see what he has to say about this as well. He picked a select few running backs. We're going to spend just a few moments on this of how we would rank these players. And I will start. So he gave us a specific list of players, and you guys can follow along here, of the Bills basically starting running backs over the last 12 years or so, roughly, if I'm going back far enough. But here's my ranking of the Bills running backs. And these were selected by him. This isn't just any running back ever. I got LaShawn McCoy as the best running back on the list. I got Fred Jackson 2. I got CJ Spiller 3. I got James Cook 4, Devin Singletary 5, and Boobie Dixon 6.
That was random. He had Boobie Dixon included in there.
Yeah,
not Gore.
Yeah, a couple others, but that's my list. And I think obviously Cook could jump Spiller, and he's got a little ways to go to jump Jackson. But right now, that's where I'm at with.
How about
with
the spelling too? AJ just completely botched LaShawn McCoy. He spelled it Lesson McCoy. Didn't capitalize the first S. Didn't have EAN. I got to question him as a Bills Twitter personality after that. But those are
the only running backs he's seen in his adult life, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Like LaShawn McCoy was probably the guy that he saw for the most. LaShawn McCoy is the easy number one. He is one of the best running backs of the last 25 years. So he's easily number one. I wish he would have went a little bit further back because it would have been nice to then compare Fred Jackson to Willis McGahee, Marshawn Lynch, Travis Henry. because I think then you have an actual discussion of who's 2, 3, 4. I think I would probably put Willis McGahee. No, I'd put Fred Jackson 2, then Willis McGahee. Then
we're not adding running backs. These
Travis
are the running
Henry.
backs he gave us.
Yeah. Okay. We won't add them. So I'll go Fred Jackson 2, CJ Spiller 3. I'll go Devin Singletary 4, just because while I think James Cook is the more talented of the two, he is only in his second year, and I need to see more out of him before I put him ahead of a running back that's actually had 4 productive seasons with this organization already. Then I'll go Cook and Boobie Dixon. Again, I don't know why he was included in this and not Frank Gore. Maybe he just wanted us to say Boobie on the podcast. So good job, AJ.
Good job, Kevin. Do you agree with? I mean, there's really not much movement here. Do you think? Do you think that it's Cook or Singletary there for the 4 spot?
I think Boobie Dixon's the best out of this group.
Oh, boo! Yeah, I mean, we should have ranked it like totally random. I like that. I like that move. But there you have it. There's our running back rooms. Kevin, what do you say? Any final thoughts of the running back rankings?
I would say the only thing that I would potentially change is swapping James Cook with CJ Spiller, because I think that he can be the glorified version of Spiller, because Spiller is supposed to be that electric weapon, and he was for a couple of years, and then he just fell off. So if Cook continues to be impressive, I think you slot him in right behind Fred Jackson.
Yeah, we need back-to-back, like roughly 1,000-yard years, and then he can take it. I think it's possible. But right now, Mike has him 2 below that. I have him 1 below that. So we all have a little bit different. There you have it. Now we have a Giants game to look forward to. We have a lot to go over with that. We chose to kind of talk us 3 today. Usually bring a guest on, but I think with their banged up nature of their roster, it's tough to break down a lot. I don't know what they have 4 and a 5th nagging injury on their starting offensive line. So it's really tough to make. You have a quarterback with a neck injury. You have Saquon Barkley. Is he wrapped up? Is he playing? Is he just going to wait a few more weeks? Is he just going to go on a bum ankle? Looked pretty bad at the time. So, like to see him play in this game. And then you have, a few defensive injuries as well. Like you don't even know who you're going to see on this Giants team. So the one starting talking point I wanted to start with here, today was, does Brian Daboll have enough talent, even with what he knows about Josh, what he knows about Western New York, what this means to him, friends and family? Like, if this was a meaningless game against the Chargers, I think the Chargers dog walk them. Like, I just think they absolutely crush them. Like, I don't even think it's close. I think it's a bad loss. But he's got something to play for here. Do you guys subscribe to that, Mike? Do you subscribe to that? I mean, they're missing, Micah McFadden, Azeez Ojulari.
That's tough, because I guess you could say, could there be extra motivation for his players to try to win one for Brian Daboll? Is that a thing? Maybe a little bit, but how much will that actually matter when you are the vastly inferior roster overall? I don't think at the end of the day that makes up for the talent gap between these two teams. I'm pretty sure that NFL teams are going to be extra motivated early in the season just to prove how good they are to begin with. But maybe there is a little extra motivation, but the talent gap is very real in this contest. You're talking about the Bills being the second DVOA team taking on the 32nd DVOA team. The Giants, by all intents and purposes, are the worst team in the NFL at this current moment. Maybe Carolina is slightly worse because they haven't gotten a win yet, but all the models are very, very, very low on the Giants. And it's not just one side of the ball. The Giants right now offensively are 32nd and defensively are 28th in DVOA. He talked about their offensive line. They have allowed 30 sacks in 5 games, Kevin. 30. They are on pace to allow 102 sacks this year. I have never heard that number in my life. I remember when David Carr was a rookie for the expansion Houston Texans. And a lot of people at that time said he shouldn't be playing because he doesn't have an offensive line that can protect him. At that moment in time, he got sacked about 76 times that year, and that was a beating. Daniel Jones has already gotten sacked 28 times in 5 games, the other 2 obviously when he was out. The Bills, on the other hand, are on pace for 71 sacks this year. They've already had a 9-sack game against Sam Howell. So you're putting up maybe the worst offensive line in football, with a quarterback in Daniel Jones that holds on to the ball sometimes too long, doesn't see where pressures are coming from, doesn't diagnose things great, up against one of the best defensive lines in football. I mean, I'm never going to count a team completely out, Kevin, because strange things happen in the NFL. You can win on any given Sunday, but I would be really, really surprised if the Giants are going to keep this close. And there's really only one thing that gives me any reason to think that, and that was a number I saw online that said out of the 11 teams that played in London, I think their next game back in the States, all 11 of them either trailed or were losing at some point in the fourth quarter of their next game in the States. So maybe there's still some lag from the travel, the trip. But if you're just looking at these two teams on paper, there's nothing that suggests this should even be close.
Kevin, I want to get your thoughts on that too, but briefly, why don't you tell us, wrap up a little bit about what we were talking about with Matt Milano and the Bills defense here, as, will it affect some of this lag, meaning one of the bigger portions of what came out of this were the injuries. So will some of that defensive injury lag on top of the kind of the numbers that Mike was just talking about with how you coming off of a London game isn't very favorable. So they need to do something with this series, in my opinion. And unless you're going to move Jacksonville there or something, they got to do something with this in terms of these numbers during, around, before, after. They're just not great. So why don't you start there and tell us what your thoughts are on Matt Milano, the Bills defense in general with the injuries, and is there going to be a lag as the Giants come to town Sunday night?
Well, the one thing I'll say about the Giants game for now, because like you said, I definitely want to talk about Milano and what that means for the team moving forward. If Brian Daboll is smart enough to attack the weak side linebacker for the Bills, presumably Dorian Williams, I think that's their only chance of winning. That and having Saquon back. If they can be so smart and healthy that they can attack this weakened Bills defense, then maybe they have a chance. But like you said, Mike, I just don't see them having enough firepower to take down the Bills. So that being said, going back to the Bills now, they have 3 winnable games coming up, and they essentially have to win these. These are must-win games because looking at the rest of the schedule, it's only going to get rougher. And I saw someone mentioning this in the comments. We'd be naive to think that they won't suffer any more injuries this season. And that's just the unfortunate business of the NFL. Guys are going to get hurt, and it sucks. I've been in a funk ever since. I appreciate your positivity, Mike, because that made me feel a little bit better listening to that. I do want to say I do feel better after I saw some reports that, first of all, McDermott did not rule out Milano or Daquan Jones for the whole season. So that is encouraging. And based on some reports that I was reading on Twitter, you mentioned Kyle and the Thigh Doc too. There are just some different personal opinions that are out there, educated opinions, I should say. But what I'm seeing is these could both be 3-month injuries. And if that's the case, the playoffs start in exactly 3 months. So I know that is best case scenario, and that's asking a lot. That's a tough task. But for me mentally, that made me feel better because I felt like a boulder was on my chest on Sunday night and Monday. And then I felt like that got lifted a little bit. I was like, okay, there's a little bit of breathing room now. You're telling me there's a chance. So that made me feel better. And I think what this comes down to, starting with this game against the Giants, is that the offense is going to have to carry this team. So before we get into the offense, I just want to say one last thing about Matt Milano. There is no replacing Matt Milano. It's impossible. That is how good he is. I would argue that he is the most important player on that Bills defense and the third most important player on this team behind Josh and Stephon Diggs. Because he is a guy who literally does everything. He can defend the pass. He can defend the run. He's athletic. He's smart. He's instinctual. He communicates well. Literally everything you want to do, he does as a linebacker. And it sucks because we're Bills fans and we would love to have him on the field, but Bills are having a lot of primetime games coming up now. And I feel bad for football fans in general that they will not be able to watch Matt Milano on the football field because him and Fred Warner are arguably the top 2 off-ball linebackers. I mean, Milano was first team All-Pro last year. He was a Pro Bowler. And this year, I would have to check, but I think he was on pace to have a career high in tackles. He only had 101. As good as Matt Milano is, the most tackles he's ever had in a season was 101. So he already had 30 tackles. He had 2 interceptions. He forced a fumble, and he was just all over the field. And the stat that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about was that his passer rating allowed when targeted was a 28. The next best linebacker was Ernest Jones with the 52.1. That's not anything to be scoffed at. I mean, that is a huge separation, 28 to 52. And then for what it's worth, Terrell Bernard was 5th with, I believe, a 55 point something. But that shows the separation that Matt Milano has on the rest of these linebackers. And, going back to how I opened this up, that means that the Bills are going to have to carry this team offensively, because the Bills are still going to be good defensively, but they're not going to be dominant. So that means that Allen has to be on his A game, Diggs has to be on his A game, and Ken Dorsey. The pressure just ramped up for Ken Dorsey this year.
I think you can make an argument, though, that has the Bills defense stepped up against big time opponents in recent years? Yes, the defense has had elite numbers in the previous seasons, but when they've played massive, high volume, high scoring offenses, they haven't had their best days. And we've seen that in the playoffs, where even when they've had Matt Milano, this team has gotten torn apart at times. So I don't really think it's a situation of where the Bills ever really could depend on their defense against the best of the best. It was always going to be needing Josh to carry them whenever they played a Kansas City or a Cincinnati, because quite frankly, the Bills have never shut down either of those teams when they would play them. There was the one Sunday night game where it was raining, where Mahomes had some struggles. There's been games where the Bills have had timely plays, like the Taron Johnson interception to seal a game and the Von Miller sacks. But realistically, the Bills defense has not won them major games outside of really dominating subpar competition in the average teams. The Bills defense has done great against the 80% of the league. That's why their numbers have been great. They have struggled against the good teams. And I think what also helps this loss a little bit more than what we would have thought before the year is that before the season, we had no idea what Terrell Bernard was. And I know we take all PFF grades with a grain of salt, because some of them are just widely off and not even worth bothering. But if you look at the grades right now for Bernard and Milano was a 73. Matt Milano was a 72. So, no, Milano was a 73. Bernard was a 72. Pardon me. But the fact is, it's not like they're now 2 horrible linebackers. They have a linebacker that has stepped up, that is playing well, who has been doing a good job in coverage in the middle of the field. Terrell Bernard is doing his job. Right now, the question is, can they get Dorian Williams in there, and can he figure things out on the fly? He's not going to be Matt Milano. We all know that. But they just need him not to be a massive liability. And I don't think it's too much to ask Dorian Williams to just be okay. And if he's okay, this defense is not going to fall to be 18th, 19th, 20th. They'll fall from 3rd to maybe 9th, 11th, 12th. And if this is a defense that's allowed around 17 to 18 points a game the last 2 years. If they suddenly now allow 21, 22 points a game, how much is really changing when you have an offense that currently is scoring 31.8 points a game and last year scored 28.5 points a game? It's really not that much. So, like, when you put it into context and you look beyond just the players that are down and you actually put numbers next to it, those 3 players are not going to be worth more than 5-6 points a game. The Bills offense still scores enough to carry them on a game-by-game basis for the most part.
Yeah, Mike, I agree, but I'm looking at it from a different point of view as well, because, those are huge losses. And that Miami game, that was probably the best defensive outing that we're going to see from a complete defensive standpoint. Maybe they're going to have a better game like the Giants. Maybe they completely shut them out, or the Patriots. But from a health standpoint, that was like our high point this year, just having everyone healthy and active. And the fact that they held that high powered offense to 20 points, they came off of a 70-point performance and the Bills essentially dominated them. That was amazing. So the thing that I'm worried about now is I think they can still be a productive defense. And like you were saying, the offense is going to have to win them games. And that's what they've been doing right along. I mean, this is an offensive driven league, and I agree. But the thing that concerns me now is, will the offense feel too much pressure? Because the Bills had a great balance of knowing that they had a great offense and a great defense. Like talking about the Dolphins game, the defense did their part, the offense did their part. And what my concern now is that Josh is going to start pressing and Dorsey could potentially start pressing because they just got Josh out of playing hero ball. You know, the Jets game happened and they say, hey, look, Josh, we have a great team around you. Take what the defense gives you. Our defense is going to shut them down. We'll get the ball back and we're going to go down the field and score. But now the defense has lost 3 key players, one on each level. I'm not sure if we mentioned that yet, but a defensive tackle, linebacker, and a cornerback. I'm just concerned now that the offense is going to start pressing and feeling like they have to do too much, and we could start seeing some of that hero ball once again.
That's not going to happen. These guys have been playing football for a long time. That's not what goes on during a locker room. They have to trust each other, and they have to trust the next man up. And they realize that these losses will definitely impact the defense as a whole. But they also realize that they have a very, very talented group still. Inside a locker room, a team is not going to suddenly start pressing because they lost a linebacker. We went through the secondary. All of the guys starting the secondary are still are guys that have started 20-plus games outside of Benford. The entire defensive line are guys that are veterans and guys that are plenty of experience. The linebacking core is going to be a struggle at times. Yes. But there's a reason why a lot of people say that linebacker is similar to running back in football. It's a position that has become more of a coverage position in recent years and less of that run-stopping ability. Now, Milano was good doing both. That's why he was so special. The reason they drafted Dorian Williams is because of his athletic upside. They think he can be that type of guy that Milano is. Now, he's not there right now. But Dorian Williams was drafted in the 3rd round backer on this Bills team. It's not like fans gave up on Bernard last year, and we're seeing how good Bernard is right now. In an ideal world, the Bills would want Dorian Williams to have a redshirt year or 2 and then take over. But now he's getting forced into the fire. Sometimes that's not the worst thing in the world. Sometimes you put a guy in the fire and then you realize, damn, this guy has some game. Now, I'm not saying that Dorian Williams is going to be Milano day one. I don't even expect him to be close to Milano. But this is happening week 6. The Bills are going to safely make the playoffs unless something crazy happens. Dorian Williams now has 11 weeks to get acclimated to this defense. It doesn't matter what they look like right now. It matters what they look like in the middle of January. And if you give any player 10, 11 weeks, especially one with the upside to be a day 2 pick in the NFL draft that runs a 4.49 40 and has an 88 percentile in the RAS, meaning that he's more athletic than 80% of the drafted linebackers in the NFL in the last 40 years, they're going to believe that they can teach him something. Let's also remember who's coaching up Dorian Williams right now. Bobby Babich Jr. Bobby Babich Jr. is one of the best position coaches in the entire NFL. He is a future defensive coordinator, and if he does well with that, he might be a head coach one day. You're talking about the coach that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer had their all-pro seasons under. Then last year transitions to linebackers coach. Matt Milano has an all-pro season. Now, Terrell Bernard, as a first-year starter, is looking like an above-average linebacker after barely playing last year. If there was a position where you're going to have an injury where you have a coach with raw ball of clay that you want to coach up, it would be whoever is under Bobby Babich Jr. because he will make sure that they learn. and that they are doing the right things. Now, it's going to be ugly at times. There's going to be mistakes. But the Bills have one of the best point differentials in the NFL. They entered this weekend with a plus 84. Now they're plus 79 through 5 games. So over the last 3 years, they had something like a plus 540 or plus 550, which means on average, they win each game by 10 points. When you are winning your average game by over 10 points, even if your defense allows 5-6 points more per game, which realistically probably shouldn't happen with the guys on their defense, that still gives you 5 points of spread to where you're still going to win those majority of the games. When you're beating teams by 20, now you're just going to beat them by 13. Like it doesn't suddenly change everything drastically. And I do want to say a couple things about the offense too. For the people that have given up on the Super Bowl hopes and have given up on the Bills' chances this year, if you think that Josh Allen is a franchise quarterback, that is the second best quarterback in the NFL, you can't then also simultaneously give up on their chances. Because if you truly are a franchise quarterback and the second best quarterback in the league, then your team is always in the game, regardless of if you have the 3rd ranked defense or the 25th ranked defense. You're not a franchise quarterback if you don't have the ability to carry your team. And I saw a comment earlier that said, well, Philip Rivers never did it. Philip Rivers is the Hall of very good. He was a good quarterback, very good. Philip Rivers was not a Peyton Manning. He was not a Tom Brady. He was not a Patrick Mahomes. He did not have the ability to carry a team. He barely won in the playoffs. He barely did things. Josh already has 4 playoff wins. And I got a few things about Josh right now because he seems to be a hot topic after these games against Jacksonville and New York Jets earlier this year. And a lot of people have been attacking Ken Dorsey too, which we can have a conversation about that at a later time. Josh Allen through 5 games this year is on pace for a career high in completion percentage, a career high in passing touchdowns, and a career high in passing yards. Josh Allen is on pace for the best passing season of his career right now. So there's a lot of talk about how this offense just looks disgruntled. This offense looks bad. Josh is on pace for around 37, 38 touchdown passes, 4,700 plus yards, and he has a completion percentage in the 70s. The Bills are scoring 31.8 points a game. The leaders in the NFL last year were Kansas City at 29 points a game. So the Bills are 3 points higher than the top team in the league last year. And Kansas City played the Jets, and they played Jacksonville this year. They scored 40 combined points in those 2 games. The Bills scored 36. Kansas City scored 17 points against that same Jacksonville defense. They scored 23 against the Jets. Against the Jets, Mahomes had 2 interceptions, should have been 3, had a fumble, recovered it. Josh Allen, 3 interceptions, fumble, didn't recover it. We got to put things in perspective. This offense is cooking right now. They had a bad day against a good defense, a defense that has given maybe the greatest quarterback the last 5 years, and a guy that's going to be an all-time great when it's all said and done, trouble as well. When you keep in perspective, you realize things are not as gloom and doom as what a lot of people want to make it out to be. This defense could allow 24 points a game, and I'd still have faith they'd find a way to win 10 games and make the playoffs. But they're not. They allowed 10 points a game, basically 12 points a game, around that area before this Jacksonville game. And even with all those guys, they played a former number 1 overall pick quarterback. They played a team with Christian Kirk. They played a team with Evan Ingram, with Calvin Ridley, Travis Etienne. And they held them to 25 points against Trevor Lawrence. That is the worst defensive lineup you will see all season playing for the Bills. The worst defensive lineup you will see all season. UDFAs, practice squad guys that had no right being on the field. And they allowed 25 points against a former number 1 overall pick quarterback who has 3 great receivers, a good tight end, and a first-round pick running back.
One thing I did hear earlier this week, real quick to wrap up some news and notes, I did hear Matt Milano had surgery on the upper leg. My expectation is quicker than 4 months at this moment. So I do believe there's some availability at some point in January. We'll see if they do deem that the ligaments were okay. We don't know anything about that yet. So I believe they are okay, but we don't know anything for certain. But if it's just the leg, I do anticipate it quicker than a 4-month rehab and potentially playoff. And that's probably why McDermott was hesitant. And that's what I've heard from there. As far as Daquan Jones, not sure on surgery there. And Trey White, I'm not overly sure on the Achilles there as well. So I'm not sure.
Daquan is in New York City today. So I think that would imply that he's en route to get his surgery. So that should be coming pretty soon here.
There is some info too about the torn pecs. If it's less severe, it could be I think it's a 6 to 8 week if it's less severe. If it's a more severe injury, it could be a 3 to 4 month recovery. So the two things are going to be the severity of the injury and then how quickly he can heal after the injury. You're hoping if it is something severe that it's on that lower end of the time frame where 3 months and hopefully he can be back for the beginning of the postseason or late in the regular season, depending on what level, what degree he actually suffered.
There you go. So I think that there's definitely still some hope at this point based on the timelines, what we've been hearing. So we'll see how that all plays out, and we'll bring you anything as we know inside the team or inside of our player sources. So we'll see what happens there with those injuries, but it's looking like at this point 3 months either way. And we'll see if anything makes that drastically go up or down. But the good news is I do believe that Bull should be back in full strength around close to the spring, to OTAs and whatnot. There should be no issues there. Unlike some injuries like Trey, twice. I mean, Trey should be back at some point for training camp based on that. And depending on what kind of Achilles surgery, if he gets the Rodgers, the new school bracing technology, that should be something he is much ready for as well around the spring into the summertime. So the good news is you should have all three of them to start preseason as compared to missing Vaughn and the previous injury to Trey, where you missed them for over a year, 11 months. But Vaughn's going to only end up missing, he did play, obviously, he didn't talk a ton about Von Miller. The Bills only are going to be missing him for, the total of his 6 games he missed last year on top of the 4. So he missed 10 games. It doesn't feel like it feels like more. But that is ultimately didn't even miss a full season worth of games the way that the schedule fell. So 10 games was what Von Miller was out. And hopefully with why I wanted him to play and why I thought the Bills could be quote unquote aggressive, 20 snaps, 30 snaps, 40 snaps. And then that's probably around what he'll normally get, 40 to 45 snaps, 50 snaps in a game. So I wanted that clock to start now so that if they need to utilize him throughout the season, he's ready to go rather than having to pull him off the list, hope to ramp him up to fill in. So I think that the Bills did the right move so far with 20 snaps, ball cap, maybe 30 snaps this week, ball cap, hopefully getting close to normal as you start to approach the Patriots into the Bucs and Bengals. So we'll see at what point he gets full reps. But I do anticipate 2 maybe limited days, a 3rd day of getting closer, and then a 4th day, a game of being closer to his regular stuff. So that's your Bills injury update here. But as you look at the New York Giants, as we've talked about a lot of different things, just to kind of put a bow on them, Brian Daboll's offense is not very good. The last ranked offense in the league right now. That is not something you expected to see. They've had some pretty poor play from Marcus McKeithen. John Michael Schmitz has been injured and not looking good. Andrew Thomas looks like he'll be out. I think Shane Lemieux, their starting left guard, should play. They played some snaps from practice squad. Jalen Mayfield, who scored a 0 on Pro Football Focus for his performance, and struggling right tackle Evan Neal will be a go as well. Cole Beasley activated to the practice squad just recently. I'm sure he's going to try his best to do his Josh Allen impression and what he likes to do. They got Boogie Basham to bring them preseason defensive calls too. So we'll see how that looks. So we'll see if the Bills do some things in this game, maybe run some more 11 than they're used to, maybe some more 12. The 12 is completely different than maybe what Cole Beasley was playing in underneath the Bills and Ken Dorsey. So there is plenty of differences from year to year. And then those receiver weapons, you got, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slay, and Isaiah Hodgins, Jalen Hyatt, Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, just not a very awe-inspiring unit. Darren Waller is probably their top weapon. They struggle to get him the ball at times. Will Daniel Jones play? And if he does, will he be tentative with that neck injury? Is he going to be able to scan the field? That's been an issue for him throughout the last neck injury. And Tyrod Taylor, will we see him play at all? I think it's possible you could see him. I think they're stupid. We're going to start there kind of with the Giants talk here because we talked about a lot of other things.
Can we talk about these receivers, Kev?
Of the Giants?
Yeah, can we talk about them for a second?
Do you have numbers?
I do have some numbers.
Okay, let's talk about them.
And these aren't advanced stats. These aren't the fancy metrics I like to use. Sometimes a basic box score is good enough. Paris Campbell, we talked highly about him this offseason. We thought he could have been a good guy for the Bills. 16 catches for 85 yards. He's averaging 5.3 yards per reception. That is horrendous. And you would say, okay, maybe that's one guy in their team that's struggling. Wan'Dale Robinson, another guy that you'd think, all right, he'll be decent. 14 catches, 79 yards, 5.6 yards per reception. Isaiah Hodgins, the one that got away, the receiver that Bills fans always will be missing until the end of time because of an 8-game stretch last season. 10 catches, 107 yards, 1 touchdown. I'm missing that 35 catch pace for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, Kevin. I'm missing it. That's a huge loss for us. Darren Waller is the only guy on this entire Giants offense that has done anything. He's the only one that's done anything. 239 receiving yards, 23 receptions. Darius Slayton has 167 receiving yards. Like I said, Isaiah Hodgins has 107. This passing offense is putrid. It's disgusting. The offensive line has allowed 30 sacks. Like I said, they're on pace to allow 102 sacks this year. Last year, the team, I don't know the exact team, but I saw this stat earlier today. The team that allowed the most pressures in the league was around 225. The Giants are on pace to allow over 325 pressures this year, which is 100 more than the worst team in the league last year. This offensive line is going to set records for their futility and crappiness this year. And if they get Saquon back, yeah, that might make their life a little bit easier until you then realize that even Saquon Barkley hasn't had success this year. 29 carries, 114 yards, 3.9 yards per carry. This Giants offense hasn't just been bad. They have been historically bad through 5 games. One of the worst offenses that we have ever seen in the history of the NFL at this point in a season. And I'm trying to find what I had here. It'll be 1 second. This was from an ESPN story earlier. And the quote is, outside of 1/2 against a Cardinals team that just might be tanking on a personnel level this season, the Giants might be the worst offense in the history of the league through 5 games. After going without an offensive touchdown in Sunday's blowout loss to the Dolphins, putting what they have done into perspective is remarkable, especially given the hype they had in most places heading into the season. They've held a lead for a grand total of 19 seconds all season in 5 games. 19 seconds. And that's when they were leading Arizona at the very end after pulling back a 21-point comeback. I got one other thing I want to show you guys. A lot of people are upset at Ken Dorsey. They're tired of the Bills offense. If you haven't heard, the Bills offense can't scheme anything open. Who cares that they had the number 2 scoring offense last year? Who cares that they had the number 2 DVOA offense last year? Who cares that right now they have the number 3 DVOA offense, that they're averaging 31.8 points a game, that Josh Allen is on pace for career highs in yards, touchdown passes, completion percentage? Who cares that the running offense is having success for the first time in 3-4 years, 5 years, whatever it's been? We all hate Ken Dorsey, right? That's what everybody says. Ken Dorsey can't coach. Well, you know what? Look at Brian Daboll throughout his career as an offensive coordinator and a head coach. Look at these numbers. Look at them. Only twice in 10 years as an offensive coordinator or a head coach has Brian Daboll had an offense that finished above average. That means 80% of the time that Brian Daboll has led a team's offense, they have been in the bottom half of the league. 80% of the time. We think Leslie Frazier is a bad defensive coordinator at times. Well, he's normally in the top half, and he's had top 5, top 10s. Brian Daboll has only had 2 seasons in his entire career where he finished with an above average offense. And those 2 years, he had Josh Allen as his quarterback. Without Josh Allen as his quarterback, Brian Daboll's pure numbers here are one of the worst offensive coordinators in the history of football, based on yards per game and points per game. In fact, Brian Daboll has only 2 seasons in the top 5. Based on this Giants performance this season, he's going to have 5 seasons in the bottom 5. So I am so tired of the Daboll love, the Dorsey hate. Daboll did well in Buffalo. I give him credit. I love it. He went to my high school. He's a good head coach. He overperformed with the Giants last year. They went 9-8, and he's part of the turnaround with the Bills. I like it, and I think he is a good head coach. But the numbers do not support the love for him. And if we are going to love Daboll and say stuff like he's a better head coaching candidate than Sean McDermott, which a lot of people on Twitter and social media have said over the past year, let's move on from McDermott. Let's make Brian Daboll our head coach. If we're going to say stuff like that, people are crazy. Like, the fact is, at the end of this year, Ken Dorsey will have as many top 5 offenses in 2 seasons as an offensive coordinator as Brian Daboll in 10 years.
Yeah,
I just can't wait for Sunday, because I've heard so many people all offseason say how Sean McDermott's not good enough. Our window's closing. Ken Dorsey's a sucky offensive coordinator. I can't wait till the line's 14.5. I can't wait till the Bills go out there and they beat the Giants by 20+ points. And everyone that's been talking all this crap all week, all offseason, has to eat their words. And I know they'll just say, well, you just blew out a bad team. I don't care. I'm ready for a Sunday. I'm pumped. It's going to be a fun night in Buffalo in Orchard Park. And this Bills team is going to romp the Giants. And if they don't, well, then I have some concerns.
It's an issue, too, because Brian Daboll won Coach of the Year last year because he went 9 wins with this team. Not a very good team. Analytically, they weren't very good. You've seen the regression this year. And he won Coach of the Year over Sean McDermott, who had to face a shooting, an ownership issue, health issue, a terrible storm, a player die on the field that come back. Like, there was a lot. Died. Yes, you had multiple injuries and things off the field like that as well. Just a complete coaching job to get them to 13 wins through that adversity to get to a divisional round and win a division and still win more games than they did the prior year, the year that everybody loved under Daboll. He went, on an average statistical year with a average to bad roster and went 9-7-1. Like, overall, like, I'm not overly impressed. And I thought he stole the Coach of the Year last year from Sean McDermott, who deserved it not only for his on the field performance, but what he was able to do off the field as well. The 9-7-1 doesn't impress me. I'm sorry. You need double-digit wins to win that award at any point of the year. So I don't really care what people say. And then did Josh make Brian Daboll, or did Brian Daboll make Josh? I'm sick of the argument. Josh Allen made Brian Daboll, period. Like, I'm sick of this one clip we have of him yelling at Josh and getting him under check and you don't get jittery, Josh. No. Josh Allen made Brian Daboll what he is today and into a head coaching candidate, just like he's going to do for Ken Dorsey. There is enough evidence there that is proof of that, not proof of Brian Daboll making Josh Allen who he is today. There's more evidence that Josh Allen is the guy who's going to make plenty of offensive coordinators head coach in this football league. And him and Diggs' combo, that's what it's going to take. But let's look at the Bills side of the ball real quickly, guys, in this Giants matchup before we wrap. Kevin, bring us what you think of the Bills' weapons, their receiving core, what we saw a little bit more with Hardy, a couple catches there. Diggs is still getting a lot of the receptions, even when Dalton Kincaid's open. Dalton Kincaid is in concussion protocol. I doubt he plays. Only 20% of players have played after a concussion. Coming back in with symptoms isn't a great sign on top of the rookie. I think there's only one rookie who has played in a concussion this year. So the odds are not in his favor unless it's something very, very mild so far this season. But I don't anticipate him playing, which means Knox, which means Joel Wilson, and it means Quentin Morris. So we'll see how that looks. But I think we're going to get a little bit more 11 this week, potentially. Kevin, what do you think of the Bills' weapons so far? And what do you think as they enter the Giants game?
An interesting stat that I found today is that the last time a Bills player not named Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis went over 100 receiving yards was December 26, 2021, and that was Isaiah McKenzie when he put up 11 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown versus the Patriots. And for what it's worth, Gabe Davis, he caught 6 balls for 100 yards and a touchdown on Sunday versus Jacksonville. He almost went a full calendar year since he eclipsed the 100-yard mark. The last time he did that was October 9th, 2022, when he erupted for 171 yards versus the Steelers. So the Bills really need to find a third target, maybe even a second target, because Gabe Davis isn't bona fide number 2. He's either boom or bust. So you have Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs, but what do you have after that? Because if the offense is going to carry this team now with the depleted defense, I need someone else to step up. I need to see them use Dalton Kincaid more once he's healthy. And for what it's worth, Knox is dealing with that wrist injury, so we'll see his availability. But they signed Trent Sherfield. They signed Deontay Hardy. They drafted Justin Shorter, who will be coming back from his short-term IR stint. I need some of these guys to start stepping up. Or maybe I need Ken Dorsey to start utilizing them better, because something's got to give here. We can't just have Allen and Diggs do everything. And I think Trent Sherfield could be an X factor here. I would love to see more of Trent Sherfield moving forward.
I got a quick response to you. So I agree. Gabe Davis is kind of boom or bust, but I don't think he's the problem. I think the problem is that the Bills haven't properly gotten a quality number 3 receiver to complement Diggs and Davis as 1 and 2. And I'm going to throw some numbers at you because that's what I'm doing today. And I'm having fun doing this. So Gabe Davis right now has about 18 catches for around 320 yards. And I know projections are not always accurate. You're not going to keep the same paces that you're doing. Gabe Davis is on pace for around 61 catches for 1,080 yards and around 12 touchdowns this year. If you heard anybody have 61 catches for 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns on any other team, would you want them to be the number 2 receiver on the Bills?
Yeah, but again, those are just
so the answer is that Gabe right now is performing at a high level.
Right now, though,
4 touchdowns. He's had a touchdown the last 4 games. Gabe Davis is playing plenty fine right now. And the offense has been clicking. They had a poor game against Jacksonville. That's it. The issue people have with Gabe Davis isn't that he isn't a good receiver. It's that the Bills use him in a downfield role that leads to higher variance on a weekly basis. Meaning when he gets a good catch that's 30, 25 yards down the field, his stats are going to be good that week. When he doesn't get those plays, his stats are going to be bad that week. It is how he is being used by the Bills. Gabe Davis does not get many short routes. They do not give him easy receptions. He is not going to ever be a high reception guy because of how they utilize him. I mentioned guys on the Giants already, like Paris Campbell and Wan'Dale Robinson. They both have around the same amount of catches as Gabe Davis. Them combined have less than half the yards of Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is routinely near one of the top receivers in the league for guys with 40-plus receptions in yards per catch. It's a usage thing. They go downfield with him because it opens up other facets of their offense. He has 2 drops this year. The drops have not been a problem. He had a bad drop at a bad time on Sunday. I agree that it killed the drive and it hurt them. But what the Bills need more than someone to take over for Gabe Davis is they need someone to complement Gabe Davis. And that was what Dalton Kincaid was brought in to do. And so far, I agree with Kevin. I agree with both of you guys. It's been underwhelming based on Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox so far this year. They need those guys to step it up more, to make things flow better. What they need to seriously look into, though, is drafting a receiver to be a solid threat in the slot, to be that 3 guy, to make things flow even better on this offense. And until they do that, we're going to be looking at Gabe Davis and say, why aren't you performing more? What more does he have to do? He's one of the top 15 in touchdowns last year for receptions. He was top 35 in yards. He is doing what number 2 wide receivers do. He needs to be more consistent, but every single stat backs up he is a number 2 receiver in the NFL.
That's it right there. Consistency. I agree with what you said. And it's all fine and dandy to say he should have 1,100 yards. And how many touchdowns? 13?
But Kevin, it's the role that the Bills are using him. If they decide, you know what, we're just going to give you a couple quick slants or a couple wide receiver screens a game. You add a couple, he would add 2 more receptions a game. He'd have maybe an extra 20 yards. And then at the end of the day, you would be saying, oh, he's consistent. They are using him in a way that leads to inconsistency. It's his usage. Your offensive scheme, your offensive coordinator, the way you're being put on the field has as much to do with your production as what your talent is. And we've done this at Cover One. We've looked into the numbers. We have the analytics. We have the metrics. We've looked at this. The route tree that he is asked to run limits his production when it comes to having a more consistent game. He gets asked to make tougher plays that are more downfield, that are lower probability throws for Josh Allen. I'll be real. Like, I need him. I want more for him. I want more for this Bills offense in general. But one thing that a lot of times we do as fans is we want more from our team. But then we don't look across the league and ask, what is the average number 2 wide receiver doing in the NFL? Do you know what the average number 2 receiver in the NFL does production-wise? It's around 700 yards. And it ain't 70 catches. It ain't 80 catches. Gabe Davis was 800 plus last year. He missed some time. In fact, if he didn't have the high ankle sprain, it's safe to assume Gabe Davis would have finished with over 900 yards and maybe 8 or 9 passing touchdown receptions last year. So I get it. And I understand your points. And it's been points that people have been making all over social media. And it's points that I hear on the radio. And it's points I've heard even analysts nationally say. They could be better. But there's a lot of other teams across this league that would love a guy like Gabe Davis as their number 2 receiver.
One thing I just want to say real quick is, again, I agree with what you're saying, that they ask him to do different things, but maybe that means we should have a conversation about Ken Dorsey, because, again, it's all fine and dandy to say that he could finish with 1,100 yards, or he should, but will he? And maybe that comes back to Ken Dorsey. Maybe Gabe needs to line up in the slot. Maybe we need a quick slant or a quick out route. We just need to get that production. I don't care how they do it, but they need to get that production behind Diggs.
Who has the most snaps behind?
If you do Ken Dorsey's, so Ken Dorsey now has been the offensive coordinator for 21 regular season games for the Bills. 29.5 points a game. I'm just saying, like, some of this has to just stop. It has to stop. Like, I just, Kevin, I just can't do it anymore. Like, 29.5 points a game in 21 games as an offensive coordinator. And we're talking about this guy being an awful offensive coordinator. The rest of the league looks at Bills fans and they think we're stupid when we say stuff like that. They think we're stupid. Kansas City didn't average 29.5 points a game last year. We really had to stop with the Dorsey hate. We look foolish to the entire rest of the league when we call out an offensive coordinator that is averaging nearly 30 points a game.
I don't think you're talking specifically to me, but I don't think he's awful.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking out. There was articles from people in league circles written a couple weeks ago. Ken Dorsey is widely regarded already as a top 5 to 10 offensive coordinator, according to executives and other higher management guys across the NFL. He's looked at as an upper echelon offensive coordinator. The only place that doesn't think that Ken Dorsey is an upper echelon offensive coordinator is Buffalo and our fan base. At some point, our fan base needs to be more realistic about how we evaluate our own team and how we scapegoat certain individuals on our team. When the offense struggles, we always blame it on the offensive coordinator. We never blame it on the quarterback. We don't blame it on certain other guys. Think about it. Last year, they had one of the worst offensive, if we put all these stats, the things in context, they had one of the worst offensive lines in football. We just agreed that, you just said that they didn't really have any talent outside of Stephon Diggs. They didn't have a 2 receiver. They didn't have Dalton Kincaid on this offense last year. So The Bills last year had a crap offensive line, no skill players besides Stephon Diggs, and Dawson Knox was their primary tight end. Yet they scored 28.5 points a game. How did they do it then? And you can't just say Josh Allen, because then that's giving all the credit to Josh. So then if you give all the credit to Josh, when the team scores 10 points in the playoffs, you got to give all the blame on Josh. So we got to be consistent. Dorsey can coach. Sean McDermott has been with Dorsey since his days in Carolina. Josh handpicked Dorsey to replace Daboll. Dorsey ain't going anywhere. We just need to start keeping perspective and keeping things more consistent and rational with our evaluations of this team.
A receiver 3, by the way, is a slot receiver. I'm sick of hearing that Gabe Davis is a good receiver 3. Don't know what that even means when people say stuff like that. That one is what bothers me the most. Like, it's receiver 3 in an offense is a slot receiver. So if you're saying he's a receiver 4, like a third boundary receiver, don't understand what you mean. If you think that he's a receiver 3, meaning you want to give him half the snaps and play him in the slot, don't even know what that means. Like when you say that he's a receiver 3, I hear that too a lot. He's like, I hear that all the time. Actually, he's a good receiver 3. What does that mean? Like you need 2 boundaries, a slot receiver, and then he's your 4th receiver. I don't even understand what like the terminology of like calling him a receiver 3 is, because a receiver 3 is your slot receiver in an offense. So you're saying like, I think he's a receiver 4. Anyways, his numbers are elite. He ranks in the top 10 in every single receiver 2 categories. He borderlines on receiver 1 in a lot of categories as well. He's played better than Devontae Smith with all of his metrics. So at some point, it is what it is. Like maybe there's some things you like better about Smith, and that's fine. But he's an upper echelon receiver 2 then. He's been better than T. Higgins this year. I don't know what we're doing. We're discrediting him. All he's done is play, and you'll see what contract he gets. Whether he plays up to it this year or not, don't really know yet what's going to happen in that situation going forward. But it's time to bring you our score predictions. There is a game on Sunday, and we're looking forward to seeing what the Bills are able to do. We're going to keep it the same. Mike, Kevin, myself, we're going to go bring it around the horn. Mike is now, 3-2 in his predictions. Kevin drops to 4-1. I dropped to 3-2. So we're going to start with Mike. We're going to bring it around the horn. And we're also going to see who gets the closest score prediction this week, and we'll bring it up because this could be a wide variance of scores here. So we're going to start with Mike to bring us home with what he thinks. And this score prediction is brought to you by Sons of Erie, www.sonsoferie.com. Get out there and check all of their great artwork that is recommended by players and former players as well. Mike, bring us into your score prediction.
We're going to have the worst for first, and that's why we have me right now. So I appreciate that. And Donna, I am not okay right now. I am crazy, as you can tell, all this show. Syracuse, Kevin, and Maseri, I still love you guys, even though I feel bad that you guys had to put up with me today. No ill will between us. I will say this. I feel confident. I felt confident about this game all year. I said 5 months ago that we'd be double-digit favorites in this game. That's when Giants fans were telling me that they were a playoff team. The Giants suck. Like, they are horrible. And I mean that in the kindest way possible. Like, I root for the Giants when they're not playing the Bills. I want them to be good. I want the best for Brian Daboll. I have a soft spot for Daniel Jones, being a Duke quarterback who has some good traits. I want the Giants to be a good team, but everything points to them being one of the worst teams in football. I told you the sack numbers. They've allowed 30 sacks, but they only have 5 sacks themselves on defense. Their passing numbers are horrible. Their running numbers are horrible. Their defensive numbers are horrible. I'll be nice. I'll say Bills 42-17.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Kevin, bring us in. What do you think? Tell us what you think of this score prediction and why. I'm very interested to see where these 3 scores wind up this week.
I don't think I'm as confident as Mike, but I think this should definitely be a big win for the Bills. And if it's not, we're seriously going to have some questions moving forward. So I'm going to take Buffalo 31-13. I want to say 10, maybe even 7. But based on all the injuries on defense, I'm going to give the Giants the benefit of the doubt a little bit. I think they are going to score at least a couple of times. I don't know if the Bills' offense is totally going to be clicking. So I'm going to take a modest 31-13.
Yeah, you're not too far away from Mike's.
Yeah, we're pretty close.
Yeah, you guys,
Well, that's
you
what,
guys are
5-6 touchdowns.
Kevin, I trust you more than I trust me. You're 4-1. I'm behind you right now. So
I think what's interesting about this game is that like this could be, and I hate saying this all the time, guys. This could be their Super Bowl. Like they play on Sunday Night Football. Everyone thinks they stink. I think they stink. Mike thinks they stink. Kevin pretty much thinks they stink. Gives them a tiny bit more credit, but they're not very good. And I think that's kind of when you can see a team play up to a certain level. They're coming into Buffalo. I think that's what the Bills have going for them in this specific game. If this was in New York again, I would feel weird. I wouldn't feel weird about a loss, but I would feel weird about a close game. Bills are going to pull this game out. I think they're going to assert their offensive dominance. I have a score prediction, 37-27. I think that the Giants will score some points in this football game. That is my prediction. I think that their Bills are going to be figuring some stuff out on defense. And I think it's a 10-point game. I think they cover the spread. But ultimately, it's never really in risk. I don't believe that this game is ever in risk. And I think the Bills will show you that their offense will continue to tick on all cylinders and continue to win a football game and be frustrated at times if Saquon Barkley plays. This score prediction is based on Jones and Barkley playing like I think that they will, and them getting some of their offensive line. But the Bills' defensive line can change this game in a hurry. They've allowed the most sacks. The Bills have sacked the most. We've heard all the statistics so far on the epic levels of sacks they're going to allow and how many the Bills could end up with. So that's what we have with our score predictions. We'll see, who hones in right. Will Mike get pretty much a blowout? Will Kevin get something pretty much a blowout, a little bit more moderate, or will I get a shred of a 2-score game? Between 9 and 14 points. We'll see who rings in the victory there, because I didn't think anyone here would pick the Giants in this one. And we'll bring Mark Schofield on the show next week, one of our favorite guests. Mark Schofield will be with us live next week to talk Patriots. So that should be fun. He's got a slew of insight, always gives good talks about the Bills, and will be realistic with the Patriots. One of the best guests that we have out there. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. And the Bills could rip off some victories here, as this is the time to do it. This is the time to get back on track before the Bengals game, and we'll see where the Bengals are at that point. But they need the wins now. They need to beat a Bucs team. They need to beat a Patriots team. They need to beat a Giants team, and they need to see how they look with a very winnable rematch against the Bengals. And we'll see where they're at as well within their progression and their struggles. One of the worst first 6-game teams I've ever seen. We'll see if they can pick it up again, or if they'll continue to struggle again. But Kevin, we'll have a final takeaway from you as we wrap the show. Give us your final takeaways for this weekend.
There we go. My mute was muted.
that was the best stuff you said all day, man.
Appreciate that, Mike. One thing that I want to say about the offense, to add on to my point about needing someone to step up. Last week, I finished the show by saying that Josh Allen was electric from under center and the play action. His stats were 27-33 for 451 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a perfect passer rating of 158.3. I don't know his official numbers now, but I know that the Bills only ran play action 5 times on Sunday, and Josh scored twice on those. So I need to see the Bills run more play action moving forward, especially if we're going to rely on this offense even more so. And one other nugget that I found, 7 former Bills players on this Giants team, whether they're on the active roster or not, and 3 coaches / personnel between Daboll, Joe Shane, and Bobby Johnson.
There you go. Bobby Johnson having one of the worst seasons ever coaching the Giants O-line. But many Bills fans are happy to upgrade from him to Aaron Kromer. So there you have it. We'll see what the Bills are able to do this weekend, but we have some score predictions roaring in as we speak. Everybody leave a comment below. Please smash the like button. It helps us bring content to the show and across the Cover One Sports Network. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. Kevin's debate as well as Mike's rants. So we look forward to kind of recapping all of this and more next week. We'll see where we're at. We'll see what the Bills look like, and we'll see kind of some of the answers to some of these injury questions. And if the Bills push players like Benford and Rousseau. So those will be answered just shortly. And next week we will have, like I said, Mark Schofield on as well to talk Patriots. And that'll be a fun one too, as we recap. Probably, hopefully a big Bills victory that there's not a ton to take away. Maybe we'll have some new players to talk about there with the defensive line rotation, the linebacker position, and others. And maybe we'll see if they run a lot of 11. Maybe receiver pops out of nowhere. Will they play a lot of Quentin Morris? Will they play a lot of Joe Wilson from the practice squad? We'll have to see how the Bills' weapons turn out if Dalton Kincaid is undoubtedly, based on statistics, unable to go. So that's a wrap from the Going Deep podcast. Your host is always Kevin Masseri here with Mike Bunt and producer Kevin, bringing you the best from inside Bills land. We appreciate everybody tuning in. And as always, this show is brought to you by Sons of Erie, www.sonsoferie.com. Until we see you next week, Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we really appreciate everybody being here.